People doing extraordinary things to help others.
If he didn't do what he did, we would have died.
Heroic acts that have sometimes meant the difference between life and death.
And he was just crying, "Don't let me die, don't let me die, save me, save me."
Amazing acts of courage.
It was just a natural reaction. This guy needs help.
Captured on dash cams, CCTV, and mobile phones. Incredible stories from the UK.
He put his life at risk just to save me.
And across the world.
Mayday, mayday, mayday.
All the people that assisted with my rescues that day are my heroes.
We genuinely owe our lives to him.
Today on Saved on Camera. In South Africa, a couple on a mission to save rhinos end up needing to be saved themselves.
And I thought, I have no idea how we're going to get out of this.
They are over 200 kilometers from the nearest city and help. And even when rescue services do arrive, they are not going to find it easy.
Very concerned that for the rest of my life I would be known as the rescuer who bumped the aircraft off the cable and killed 2 people.
In the UK, a mum on the school run has a seizure at the wheel of her car.
Whilst I was seizing, my foot was pushed onto the accelerator.
Her 8-year-old son has taken over control, but he's out of his depth.
I didn't really want to steer the car, I just went for it.
It's the start of rush hour, and they're in the fast lane, travelling at 65 miles an hour.
We soon noticed there's a lady in distress in there, and a young boy hanging onto the steering wheel with fear in his eyes.
In Oklahoma, USA, a flash flood sees a woman lose control of her car, careering into a creek and trapping her underwater.
We didn't know if she could breathe, if she could get her seatbelt off, or if the pressure was too much on the doors to even open them.
She didn't have a whole lot of time. The water was rising in the creek. She needed help quick.
And in the UK, a wild deer is trapped by a rope. A trio of wildlife warriors are its only hope. They know time is against them.
The point of capture to the point of release has to be less than 30 minutes. Otherwise, you're looking at a deer that is likely to have a heart attack and die on you.
A light aircraft is entangled in a zipline 100 meters in the air. The pilot and passenger are left dangling upside down, unable to escape.
And there was just oil and fuel dripping down on us.
If the plane dislodges, they will plummet to almost certain death.
You literally think that any second you're gonna fall and you're gonna die.
Peter Gadding is a 63-year-old commercial pilot from South Africa who's been flying planes for 32 years.
Oh, I've always just loved flying. My late father was a pilot. I just had it in my veins, eh? I just decided one day I needed to fly.
Peter's wife, Mary, is also a keen flying enthusiast.
We flew a lot together with the children and without them. We went on holidays together in a little plane. Peter is very responsible as a pilot. He doesn't take chances at all. He's just a really good pilot, John.
The pair are keen conservationists and volunteer for an anti-rhino poaching charity.
We have an organisation called the Battaliers. They were looking for volunteers to fly the anti-rhino poaching missions again. And so, without hesitation, Mary and I volunteered. Is just, it's a wonderful thing to be able to do that. I had done 3 various patrols before, accompanied by Mary. I'm controlling the aircraft and so on, and she's a second pair of eyes.
You look out the side and just see if you can find any rhino that are dead or alive, and look for poachers.
We're a team, just working together.
One day, the couple were out flying on an anti-poaching mission.
It was a normal patrol. It was a nice morning. The visibility was great. Well, we had pretty much finished flying the patrol. I was about to turn back. We'd been flying for a number of hours. I decided to change the route up a little bit.
But this change of plan proved to be pivotal.
Next thing, there was this almighty crash, which was so scary. It was just actually indescribable. The actual impact was just unbelievable. I'm getting all emotional.
The aircraft hit the zipline. It sort of sprung forward and then backwards. It was the most awful noise. And then we were bouncing, hanging upside down onto the zipline. And there was just oil and fuel and stuff dripping down on us. It was like just the most awful smell. And I thought, I have no idea how we're going to get out of this. I hadn't a clue what was going on. I mean, you just don't hit things in the air. After a few seconds, I remembered, oh my God, we've actually hit the zip line. Didn't think that there was going to be a chance of being rescued. I can't even describe how terrifying it was for Mary and I, hanging upside down like that. We just held each other's hands and just hung there. You literally think that any second you're gonna fall and you're gonna die.
My heart started pounding. I was actually worried that I was going to have a heart attack. My thought straight after that was, we actually are going to die.
You know, all your blood is going to your head and out of your feet, and you're pretty much hanging on the seatbelt, and you can't move because of fear of falling. The discomfort was nothing compared to the fear.
It was just literally like being in a nightmare, but being awake.
Later, saving the couple turned into a risky situation.
We approached fairly carefully. When I saw what was holding the aircraft up, the anxiety went up.
In the UK, a car captured on a dash cam during a busy rush hour is out of control. It's travelling at 65 miles per hour and is in danger of crashing into the central reservation.
Something was going on up ahead, saw a car veering from side to side.
Swerving about all over the road.
An 8-year-old boy is helpless inside, but he's not about to give up.
The car was shaking and my mum was shaking.
The ties that bind a mother to her son are notoriously strong, but for one Colchester family, it's a bond that ended up saving their lives.
My name is Lauren. I'm a special needs teacher. I live at home with my son Ben and my partner Joe. Ben is quite mature for his age, very in touch with his emotions. So we do have a close bond, and I do feel like he's more like my friend than he is my son.
Mum's hair's big in this one.
Who's?
The one he's about to fight.
She's funny. Sometimes annoying.
Ben absolutely loves playing video games. If he's not outside playing with his friends, he will be in his room playing video games, especially car video games. Those are his favourite.
Ben's love of car video games was to play a crucial role on one particular day.
Nothing felt out of the ordinary at all in terms of what I was feeling that day. Right, you ready? Let's go. After school had finished, I was just looking forward to getting home and getting dinner on.
She was happy, she was saying hello to me. She was just driving normally.
We were driving along a very busy A road at the time.
So how was school today?
The journey home from school to our house is roughly about 30 minutes. It does involve a lot of busy A roads. It can get quite scary, a lot of impatient drivers trying to get home. About 3:30, we were talking about our days. Again, nothing out of the ordinary.
But that soon changed as Ben started to notice his mum acting strangely.
I first realised something was different when she wasn't really listening to me. And she just wasn't listening to me. What are we doing tomorrow? Mom!
In a van, just behind Lauren's car, were workmates Jimmy Dowsett and Billy Smith.
Me and Jimmy had been working on site all day and we were just on our way home.
So finishing the day, we're tired. It's December, so just wanted to get home to the family, really. The traffic was very busy that night. People coming home from work, people leaving school. I'd moved lane into the fast lane. A car started veering towards the central reservation.
Something was going terribly wrong inside the car.
The car was shaking, and my mum was shaking.
Apparently, I then suddenly started aggressively shaking, dribbling, and my eyes were closed. My hands were still tightly gripped on the steering wheel. Whilst I was seizing, my foot was pushed onto the accelerator.
The car started heading back over the other lanes.
I just assumed someone had fallen asleep at the wheel.
And I saw outside of the window that we're skidding against the walls.
Now travelling at 65 miles per hour, the car was dangerously out of control.
Apparently, Ben leant over me. He was sat on the handbrake so that he could reach over.
I didn't really want to steer the car. I just went for it.
He put the hazard lights on before he started steering the car.
It was quite difficult. It was very hard to steer it.
We soon noticed there's a lady in distress in there and a young boy hanging onto the steering wheel with fear in his eyes.
Yeah, we knew we had to do something.
Can't say I had a plan for stopping the car. I just decided that I needed to help see them off the road.
The car was weaving from side to side.
I kept looking around so I couldn't crash into anyone.
Pulled up alongside it so he wasn't putting any more danger on the road. If he'd let go of the steering wheel, he could have veered back into the road and anything could have happened.
Obviously kept the van in a straight line and Ben done the same with the car and then we slowly edged it over.
If he hits my van, damages my van, it doesn't matter, does it? You just want that boy to be safe.
And then I steered the car onto the grass.
When they went up the verge, I was speaking to Billy and I said, what's happening? He said, right, they're up the verge, just pull up and stop.
And then it slowed down.
But it wasn't over yet.
She did stop and then she started again. I'm assuming she fell back onto the accelerator and started driving towards us again. I told Jimmy to accelerate because she's going to hit us.
And then she fainted.
Billy jumped out while the van was still moving.
I knew I had to stop the car. Ben was screaming to help his mum, and obviously she was still unconscious at this point, so we stopped the car.
I went round to the side Lauren was on. She was still out of it.
I just checked her airways were clear because her head was back. I checked she had a pulse and then phoned 999. I just remember it being really cold and Ben was freezing cold. Obviously I spoke to Ben for quite a long time. I was very, very worried about his mother.
The first thing I remember after waking up, Ben was next to me, looking quite distressed. There were just strangers around the car making a huge fuss.
It didn't take her long coming round. When she started to try and talk to us, very disorientated and didn't know what was going on and it wasn't making sense, wanted to drive off again. So we just had to calm her down and make sure the keys were out of the ignition.
She was really confused what was happening.
I was trying to piece together why we were suddenly on the side of the road, because to me it felt as if I'd just blinked for a split second.
The two men waited with Ben and his mum until the emergency services arrived and then left.
When I finally got the full story of what happened, it was when I was in the ambulance with Ben and the paramedics on the way to the hospital. I was so shocked. I mean, at first, when Ben told me, I actually laughed. I thought he was joking. And it wasn't until the paramedics actually confirmed that it was likely that I'd had a seizure that I realised that I had just had a seizure at the wheel, driving 65 miles an hour down a busy road. After having multiple tests, the doctors strongly believed that the seizure was either stress-induced or it was due to medication I was taking at the time. Ben has been surprisingly humble about it. Paramedics genuinely believe that if he didn't do what he did, we would have either been seriously injured or we would have died.
Later, Ben and his mum meet up with the men who saved them for the first time.
The main reason I wanted to help was because when I pulled upside, I saw Ben, thought of my own son, thought of my own family, really.
Back in South Africa, an aerial rhino patrol has gone wrong. A couple in a small plane have accidentally flown into a zip wire, leaving them precariously balanced.
I can't even describe how terrifying it was for Mary and I, hanging upside down like that.
It was just literally like being in a nightmare, but being awake.
Despite the life-threatening situation, Peter manages to call for help.
Called up the anti-rhino poaching people and I said, look, we've hit something. I don't think I even realised it was the Zipline at the time. And they raised the alarm.
Rob Thomas is a volunteer with the South African Mountain Rescue Team and is the one to take the call.
The message came in and it was a fairly brief message. It just said aircraft crash, power lines, Pilanesberg, stand by.
The rescue services are on their way. They're not going to find it easy.
The 2 helicopters came and that was horrible because, you know, you don't know if you're going to get blown off the zipline.
We approached fairly carefully at the same altitude as the aircraft. We didn't ever want our downwash getting near it. Took a look and our primary concern was what is holding this aircraft in place. When I saw what was holding the aircraft up, the anxiety went up because the only thing holding the aircraft in place is there are 6 bolts or 8 bolts that bolt the propeller onto the flange that is mounted to the drive shaft. And one of those bolts was on the other side of the cable. That was all that was preventing them from coming off.
With their life hanging in the balance, Rob has some difficult choices to make.
If the aircraft did come off while we had somebody at the aircraft, first of all, we would kill whoever was there, but we'd also probably end up with our rescuer getting entangled in the aircraft, which would quite possibly pull the police helicopter out of the sky. So we rejected that option, which left the only real option being to come down the cable.
And that dangerous maneuver fell to Rob, sending him 500 metres down a cable to rescue them.
I don't think there was time for concern over my own safety. It was more a case of just trying to be methodical, trying to be calm.
We could actually see him coming down to us, and it just seemed to take forever.
In this case, speed is not your friend.
Did it very slowly and meticulously because he was also still concerned that if he was to make too many movements that it would also dislodge the aircraft.
I was very concerned that for the rest of my life I would be known as the rescuer who bumped the aircraft off the cable and killed 2 people. But at the same time I realized that that was the only way we could get it to happen. So it was a case of go ahead, do your best, be as careful as you can, and hope like mad and do a lot of praying.
But once Rob reaches the stricken pair, the next big question is, how is he going to get them out of the plane?
Well, the first thing he did was secure the aircraft to the zipline. Then we knew we were not going to fall off anymore. It was just a question of trying to extract us out of the aircraft without dislodging it either.
The first thing that the pilot said to me is, listen, don't take this the wrong way, but I'm really, really glad to see your face. The next thing he said to me is, please take my wife out first, which was a very noble sentiment, but I had to point out to him that he was between myself and his wife, and I didn't want her climbing over him if I could just get him out of the way first. So I simply said to him, sorry bud, you're in my way, here's a harness, here's how you put it on, get cracking.
With chivalry out of the window, it was time for Peter to get out.
He came out fairly quickly. It was obviously very difficult. If you imagine sitting in a garden chair and somebody pushes you over on your back, so you've got your feet in the air, I call it rocket launch position. So they'd been hanging in rocket launch position for a couple of hours. Once he had it on, he slowly climbed into the upright position and carefully stepped out of the aircraft.
Even though it was high up, hanging on that zipline, that was nothing compared to the fear of being in that aircraft for all that time.
But as Rob turned to save Mary, the weather was getting worse and fear was setting in.
I put my harness on, and which was not very easy in a tiny little plane, and you're trying not to move. And then I climbed over onto Peter's vacant seat.
She was halfway out and she said to me, "I'm stuck." And my initial thought was, you can't be stuck, you're climbing out of the aircraft. And I looked behind her, and the grab handle in the center of the back had managed to toggle itself on the throttle of the aircraft. So I leant over to untoggle her, and as I did that, my feet slipped off the wing strut. So I went upside down. She started to get a little bit anxious. All I said is, keep it together, you're almost out. It was literally a case of, she was probably 10 seconds away from being out of the aircraft. We got her out, we got them both onto the wing strut.
It was very high and so scary. The wind had come up, I still didn't feel safe at all. And then they started winching us very slowly. He first lowered Peter, and then he lowered me. I loved being lowered down onto the mountain, and then I knew that I was safe.
The touchdown moment on the ground was a revelation, partly because I discovered at that point that my feet and my legs didn't work anymore. I'd been hanging in harness for so long that I didn't actually have the strength to stand.
My sandals flew out the plane, so I had no shoes on. So Rob decided that I should be airlifted with the helicopter, and then Peter and Rob and the mountain rescue guys walked back. And they just put me in the ambulance and checked me out, and I was fine. My blood pressure was even normal.
There was just this enormous amount of relief. It was miraculous. We were very, very lucky.
The actual tension of that situation only hit me when I got home. It was only then that my brain started to process what I'd gone through.
Well, Rob is our hero, and actually all of them were absolutely wonderful, but Rob was the one who got us out.
I don't think there's any words that can describe the amount of respect and thankfulness that I have for all those people that were involved in the rescue operation.
The outcome could have been very different. Just the fact that they hit the wire and bounced back and dropped enough to catch on the back of the propeller. The fact that we got two people out of there was incredibly satisfying.
What started out as a positive expedition ended in a terrifying accident that could so easily have resulted in tragedy.
I think I'm maybe just a little more grateful to be alive. Yes, and have my wife in one piece and well.
More than anything, it's given me a bigger appreciation for life, because that was a miracle. I would love to do the anti-rhino poaching again. I would do it in a heartbeat.
Absolutely no reason why we wouldn't go and do more anti-rhino poaching patrols anytime that we are able to do that with pleasure. We'll be back.
In the UK, a wild deer has become trapped in the middle of the East Sussex countryside.
This poor deer that was quite clearly entangled in blue rope around its antlers.
A trio of wildlife warriors are its only hope, but any reckless release could be dangerous.
Getting hold of the head, the antlers, that is the most dangerous moment. You can then find yourself being kicked or stabbed with the antlers.
In the middle of East Sussex sits a rescue centre. It's a haven for injured wildlife, and it was set up in 1996 by animal lover Trevor Weeks. But his altruism started much earlier than that.
I've done this since I was a kid. I've always liked the countryside, I've always liked animals, and it's something that my parents have sort of instilled in me to respect nature and respect the countryside.
Kathy Martin joined the centre 11 years ago.
Trevor set it up on a small scale. I just sent him an email, just sort of said, you know, I'm available, you know, if I can help at all, then I'd love to, and so gradually got involved that way.
It's a labour of love for both of them.
We all work really, really well together. And when we've been able to get an animal back to full health and return it to the wild, then that gives you the most heartwarming feeling you can ever experience.
I think the thing with the wild animals, and with any animal really, is it can't help itself. It needs humans to help them. They can't say when they're ill, they can't say what they need, and it's down to us to assess them and to help them.
Now with a team of 150 volunteers, the centre routinely answers between 4,000 and 5,000 calls a year. One dramatic call-out, though, would end up capturing the nation.
Hello, Wildlife Rescue. I actually had a call first thing in the morning from a couple just outside of Blackboys, which is in the middle of East Sussex. And they said they could see a deer that was entangled. Its antlers were tangled in some rope attached to an old apple tree. I phoned my colleagues Kathy and Chris, and I asked them to basically bring our transit ambulance as well as all our entanglement rescue gear up to site.
The team had taken similar calls in the past, so knew the protocol that was required.
Any rescue like that has to be done by at least 3 people because of how dangerous and difficult they are to restrain and then cut free and release.
When we first got there, this poor deer that was quite clearly entangled in blue rope around its antlers.
Once we're all together on site, we all have a little team meeting to discuss how we're going to approach it and how we're going to cut it free and how we're going to release it.
But the team must be quick, or the results could be fatal.
Deer are very highly strung animals at the end of the day. They've got a lot of adrenaline naturally in their bodies, and as a result of that, when we pin them and secure them to the floor, they're going to get very, very stressed.
Do you want to go that side of that, mate?
That whole process, from the point of capture to the point of release, has to be less than 30 minutes. Otherwise, you're looking at a deer that is likely to have a heart attack and die on you.
Its eyes are sort of staring and really wide, often they're drooling. You can see their chests heaving. They're just so exhausted from trying to free themselves that, you know, that's what motivates you to get in there and to get into a dangerous situation and actually deal with it as quickly as you can.
Yeah.
They needed to begin by minimising the deer's movement, slowing it down.
Normally in these situations we try to use like a walk towards net.
Yeah.
The walk towards net is almost like a tennis net, and we use that to try and corral the deer and encourage them to run into it. It gets them under control and gives us an opportunity then to get on top of them and to control them.
But there was a problem.
We spread the walk towards net around the outside of the apple tree, but it was almost pointless because we just couldn't get it where we needed it to be.
Yeah.
To stand any chance of releasing the deer, the team needed to find a way to subdue it without using a net.
Right.
And they suddenly got that chance.
Right.
At one point the deer sort of trips over and then falls, and it gave Chris the ideal opportunity to literally spring forward and pounce onto its shoulders.
And we managed to get its head covered. We use a pillowcase to cover their eyes because they tend to quieten right down once they're in darkness.
Getting that animal pinned down and getting hold of the head, the antlers, pinning the shoulders down, that is the most dangerous moment.
Removed as well.
I dealt with a deer only a couple of days ago and found myself with some pretty horrendous marks on my arms as a result of it kicking out.
But the clock is ticking.
From the point of capture, we know we've got less than 30 minutes to get that animal released. As soon as Chris and I had full control over the deer, Kathy then comes in.
My role there was really to get that rope off as quickly as possible. You're just cutting it and cutting it, hoping that it starts getting loose enough where you can work out how to get it free as quickly as possible.
For Trevor and his colleague Chris, who continue to hold the deer down. It's a hazardous part of the process.
In any rescue like that, when you jump onto the back of the deer, you're almost imitating what a predator would do. So at that point, the animal will quite often play dead. And they try to lull you into a false sense of security so that you loosen your grip, you loosen control, and then all of a sudden they will kick out and start panicking again and trying to get free. If you lose control of them, you can then find yourself being kicked or stabbed with the antlers.
It's a rescue with danger all along the way. Kathy must cut through the rope as quickly as she can, but they all need to stay alert.
The second most dangerous moment is actually the point of release.
After cutting most of the rope free, I could tell that there was one section left that was holding the deer tightly, so I let the others know that I was going to be cutting that last section.
We then have to remove the walk towards net, get that out of the way, and make sure the deer has then got a clear escape route. On this occasion, we were a little bit concerned because going straight forward, it would have to go through a hedge, across the lane, and then into another field.
The deer's going to feel that release of pressure and think it's free when obviously we've still got Chris sitting on its back.
But the team know they have to get this deer released, and now.
You're going right, I'm going right.
Chris called 1, 2, 3 release. Chris and I would then release the deer at the same time.
As Chris jumped off the deer, he then pulls the head covering off, getting out the way as quickly as possible so that the deer can then jump off and hopefully run off into the distance.
He just jumped straight through the hedge, across the road, straight through the hedge to the other side, and just legged it across the field. And that was really nice to see him do that, and so pleased. You couldn't have asked for better.
Even though they've done this type of rescue many times before, there's still a tidal wave of emotion after every successful release.
I think you can always hear that in our voices at the end of any deer release. It's almost sort of slightly hysterical. The emotion is just such a relief seeing them run off.
Being able to release a deer like that is amazing. It's probably one of the most amazing experiences you can do, to be honest. You know, you go from seeing how scared those eyes look to then that relief on their face when they're able to run away. And it is such a nice thing to experience. It's really heartwarming.
In America, a sudden downpour in Oklahoma is creating hazardous conditions.
I saw a car. All of a sudden, they skidded in the rain and then went straight into a creek.
Emergency services were on their way, but time was critical.
She was under the water was rising, and she needed help quick.
One eyewitness caught it all on camera.
Oh, gosh. My name is Kara Copes. I live here in Oklahoma. It was a spring day, and it had been raining, and it started just getting heavier and heavier. The radio was saying that it was a flash flood warning, and I noticed that the water was filling up on the sides of the road, and the ditches were starting to get a little tall.
Kara wasn't the only driver doing battle with the elements.
My name's John Johns. The weather was pretty bad. You could hardly see in front of you. There was water covering the roads, so you had to be really cautious.
Whether cautious or not, one driver was about to suffer the full force of the floods.
As I was driving home, I saw a car coming in the opposite direction toward me. All of a sudden, they skidded in the rain. I saw the water just start spraying, and then I saw her car start to slide. It flipped over right into the side of the road and was going upside down in the grass. And all of a sudden, it went right into this creek. So the car is now in water, upside down. I immediately turned around and called 911. I could see other people getting out of their cars and rushing to the scene.
Heating engineer John wasn't far behind.
I was coming down the road, and I saw what looked like just a bunch of vehicles sitting on the side of the road with people standing, all looking towards the ditch. When you see the vehicle, immediately your heart kind of sinks. I asked, is somebody in the car?
Anybody in there?
And they said yes. The first thing that went through my mind was, they need help. And then I began to think, as a father, that's somebody's child. I couldn't imagine not doing something at that point.
I mean, she is underwater, probably in a seatbelt. Water is rising. She's upside down. We didn't know if she could breathe, if she could get her seatbelt off, or if the pressure was too much on the doors to even open them.
She didn't have a whole lot of time. The water was rising in the creek. She needed help quick.
By now, other drivers had joined the rescue.
There were lots of guys. Several had jumped in the water. They were yelling, talking about how they could get this car open. Should they break the glass? It was just so shocking.
John and the other rescuers were running out of time.
We've tried unlocking the doors, we've tried opening doors, and nothing's happening. The car was upside down. I couldn't see her. I just knew she was in there. I knew we had to get her out. It's not working. Nothing I'm doing is working. Part of you wants to give up. It's like you can't.
John and the others made another attempt.
We began rocking the vehicle back and forth, and the glass on the window broke. When the window broke, we knew the fight wasn't over at the same time because she still hadn't emerged. When she surfaced, when she come up out of the water, people on the grass all began to cheer.
Suddenly, we saw a man pulling her out, and we were just so relieved. I probably took the first deep breath since I had been there.
For John, though, there was still a job to do.
The battle wasn't even over. We still had to get her out of the water and to safety. The water is still high, water's still rising. We didn't know exactly how we were going to get her to safety.
But luckily for them, the emergency services had arrived.
It was such like a burden lifted off, knowing that somebody with professional training was going to be there to help.
She was a little cold and shivery, but I walked up and gave her a hug and told her, I'm so glad you're still with us. Nobody ever plans for something like that to happen.
Knowing someone's life in your hands is a feeling that can't be described. There's not words for it.
The actions of John and the other rescuers that day has had a lasting effect on Cara.
I feel like everyone who jumped in the water was they're just all heroes. People just really caring for someone they didn't even know.
I'm not a hero. I was just doing the right thing at the right time. Not helping is not an option if you're able.
Earlier in the UK, we saw a mother saved by the quick actions of her 8-year-old son when she had a seizure at the wheel while travelling at 65 miles per hour on a busy road.
I knew something bad was happening when she wasn't steering the wheel.
Unconscious, but with her foot still firmly on the accelerator, it was down to Ben to try and steer them to safety.
I managed to reach the steering wheel and I managed to steer the car onto the grass.
In a vehicle behind, Jimmy and Billy saw what was happening and helped Ben manoeuvre the car to safety and alerted the emergency services.
We noticed there's a lady in distress in there.
Yeah, we knew we had to do something.
I mean, at first, when Ben told me, I actually laughed. I thought he was joking. And it wasn't until the paramedics actually confirmed that it was likely that I'd had a seizure that I realised that I had just had a seizure at the wheel, driving 65 miles an hour down a busy road. After having multiple tests, the doctors strongly believed that the seizure was either stress-induced or it was due to medication I was taking at the time. Ben has been surprisingly humble about it. Paramedics genuinely believe that if he didn't do what he did, we would have either been seriously injured or we would have died.
A year later, it's a big day for Ben and his mum, as they are meeting up with the men who helped to save them for the first time.
Hi Ben, all right?
Yeah.
Hi.
What did you guys see?
The first thing we saw was the car veering to the central reservation.
Okay.
So we've come up alongside you, realised there was something wrong, and saw Ben sort of hanging on to the steering wheel. So we sort of just tried to follow the car off the road, really.
Oh, thank you so much. It's quite distressing that I don't remember any of it. I think that's the worst part. I have no recollection of any of it. I can only go by what other people have told me, by looking at the dash cam footage. That's probably the worst part for me.
Please save my mummy, that's what he said.
Did he?
But positives have come out of the event.
A lot of our friends, when they found out what happened, they actually took the time to sit down with their children and tell them what to do if it ever happened to them. So in a way, that's good as well.
So something good come out of it.
Yeah, something good has definitely come out of it, yeah.
And Lauren and Ben now have the chance to thank them.
You're heroes too, really, because I think if you weren't there, he could have possibly been on the road even longer, and something else could have happened. So, you know, thank you so much.
The main reason I wanted to help was because when I pulled upside, I saw Ben, thought of my own son, thought of my own family, really.
A lot of people would have just driven past or just driven past slowly, had a look, oh, that looks bad, and then just carried on. So for you to actually stop and help Ben and stay with us until you knew that we were safe, thank you so much.
Thank you for saving me.
No problem, you're welcome.
Thank you, mate.
That was, yeah, you done well, mate.
I think Ben's a real hero, to be honest. And his mum should be proud.
Hats off to Ben. His reaction, his courageousness, what he done is amazing.
I couldn't believe that Ben had done something like that. I mean, not a lot of adults would have acted in that way, let alone 8-year-old boys. Cheers! Cheers!
Yeah, it was really good to see them both again. To see Lauren well and see Ben smiling rather than crying. It was good.
Almost a year on, Ben's bond with his mum is even stronger.
I just wasn't thinking about anything else except from her. Now I think we have a bigger relationship with each other.